Hi, I'm Luvvie of AwesomelyLuvvie.com, and I'm a writer, a digital strategist, and a lover of technology. AT&T's 28 Days empowers people to make their own history by offering inspirational tools, tips, and stories at att.com/28days. 28 Days celebrates how African Americans have impacted our culture and highlights those we believe will have an impact in the future. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of the conversation with Rey Ramsey. Here, we talk about closing the digital divide, being a global citizen, and how his 6th grade teacher saved his life. Let's jump into it. So, how did you use any experiences of failure or setback to propel yourself forward in this career? Because what you do is, it's not what people think of when they're grown up an accountant, doctor, lawyer. You basically help find capital for issues that matter.
Well, I am 100% fueled by my experiences at a younger age where, like a lot of people, experience my share of failure and being denied access and being in a difficult situation in my school and all of the negative reinforcements of that, being told you can't and you won't.
Right.
And basically having this woman, Mrs. Pfeiffer, save my life as my 6th grade teacher, literally saving my life and telling me that I could.
Tell me more about that.
Well, we integrated a school, and there were only 3 blacks in the school, me, my brother, and my sister.
Oh, wow.
And so it was a tough place to be. And I used to get laughed at because I would raise my hand and give bad answers. And I was a DF student. And she, one day, kept me after class, which in that case wouldn't have been unusual because I had my share of detention for one thing or another. And she just looked at me, literally shook me and said, "I don't get you." And I looked at her quizzically. She said, "You're the smartest boy in the class."
Oh, wow.
And so I went home, and right at that time, my mother purchased something that a lot of young people don't remember, but it reminds me it's the modern-day version of the Internet. And back then it was called the encyclopedia.
Ah, yes.
And it was information at a fingertip. So what I did was I would come home at night, motivated by my teacher, and I would read the encyclopedia voraciously, opening up wherever I chose, and I read until the seminal moment came, the defining moment, when a question was asked in class, and I hadn't raised my hand in 2 years because of some incidences that happened that were really emotionally debilitating, and I got the answer right. The question was, you know how there's always a really smart kid in class? So this one class, it was this girl, Denise Stiano, I'll never forget it. She always got every damn question right. So the teacher asked, "What is an ICBM?" And Denise Stiano did not have her hand up. And so that was my moment. And I was like, I know that answer. And nobody else in the class had their answer up. And I raised my hand, and people started snickering, like, "Whoa, what?" And I said, an ICBM is an intercontinental ballistic missile. And everybody was like, "Whoa." And I sat up straighter in my chair, and I was like, it's on. And so, but that thought is ever present with me. I know what it's like to be on that side, and I know what it's like to be on this side. And I often say to young people, you will have one or more defining moments in your life, and ultimately it's going to be about the choice that you have. Do you opt in or do you opt out? And what we have to do is support people when they're going through this process of these defining moments and give them opportunities to opt in.
What's amazing about that is it took one person, a teacher, seeing the value that you really could bring to the classroom to basically flip a switch for you, which it sounds like she might have been your first mentor.
She was. And I'll tell you, I often say to people, that so many of us, and entrepreneurs go through this, and all of us in our lives, right? We need someone to say yes.
Yeah.
Right? We need somebody to say yes.
Yeah.
And so even in a sales perspective, I'll say to salespeople, I'll go, keep looking until you find the person who says yes. So you just picture what happens in some of these dark spaces in our society where a young person is literally looking for someone who looks at them and says yes. And so we can impact people by saying yes to them. And sometimes it's how you look at a person. It's that moment where you might put your arm around them. And so it's so powerful. So I often would speak at schools, and sometimes I would just look at somebody looking for someone who reminded me of me, and I'd go up to her and I would say, I heard you're really smart. Your teacher told me that.
Wow.
You're really good. Just keep working. And you would just see the face. And I would always think to myself, wow, you never know.
You surely don't, because the power of saying yes to somebody else allows them to say yes to themselves.
Yes, that's exactly right. And then they will do that with someone else. And we're breaking some of the cycles. So it's really important, and it's a person-to-person thing. So people get caught up in their jobs and their positions and their prestige, but something so powerful is saying yes. And I try to motivate people who work with me, sales, other sorts of things. It's that human connection. That everything ultimately is about human aspiration.
Right.
We all have a core set of aspirations. We don't have to be scientific about what we all need from each other. But for some reason, we don't go out there and do that. That's what this is all about.
I mean, I think the fear of failure also has a lot to do with it.
No question. But you know what? You don't have to answer to all of those people. If
Right.
you're saying yes to yourself,
Right.
keep looking for the person out there that will say, they're out there. You just have to look. And
Absolutely.
It took me a long time. And I found someone. And she found me.
So, Ray, tell me about other moments that have defined your work in a way that possibly even changed the way you do it.
I can't help but think back a few years ago, meeting with the school superintendent in Bertie County, North Carolina, a rural area, one of the most tobacco-dependent counties in the United States. And the superintendent basically said, you can take these young individuals, and these were all males, and basically they've been discarded from the school system. So what had happened was we had a program at One Economy Corporation that was called Digital Connectors that now other institutions run. And the Digital Connector program would take young people and give them a stipend for going out to their communities and providing services to people to help them understand how to use technology. And we were running a program in Bertie County. And long story short, the county basically said, here's some money, the school district. Take these young people, because the only thing they've been responding to was your technology-based program, and keep them off the streets. And I refer to this as like the accidental school. So we met this extraordinary woman, Vivian Sanders, and we basically created a school in Bertie County that the young people referred to as the Hive, as in the beehive. And it just had remarkable results because every one of the boys, it was a boys' school, every one of them was kicked out of high school for disciplinary reasons or for academic reasons. And suddenly we have them in a structured classroom setting, utilizing technology to give them a window to information that they weren't necessarily used to before. Every one of them was referred to as Mr. because we showed them respect. And we looked at each one of them as a possibility and not as a problem.
Yes.
And the results in terms of them beginning to read, them beginning to do well. And so this story of the Hive was turned into a movie, and I'm proud to say that AT&T helped to do showings of this movie. It's called The Hive, and it's now shown on BET. And Robert Townsend is the director, and I co-produced it with him. And it's the story of their lives about them determining, these young boys, would they opt in to society and go to the school, or would they opt out by dropping out? And one by one, they were opting in and then being able to go back into the education system.
That sounds fantastic.
And I'll tell you, when I left, I was president of an entity called Enterprise, and we had offices all over the United States. And I wanted to start this venture, the focus on digital divide issues in the year 2000. Mm-hmm. And everybody was lining up to say no. Everybody was lining up to say no. And I remember leaving my job and my father saying to me, well, you had a good job. And I started in the basement with 4 people. And we had to work our way through the basement with folding tables, borrowed computers, and we had one simple concept, and that was that we could use technology to empower people, and that our focus was to put technology into the hands of low-income people. And years later, we helped hundreds of thousands of people get access to that technology, and we were helped by major corporations who actually started to get it. And it was a form of impact investing, because suddenly we were able to get entities like AT&T and Comcast and others to join us in this endeavor, wiring up affordable housing buildings, launching youth training programs called Digital Connectors, and creating online content that was designed to meet people in English and Spanish at the right literacy level to help them get information that they needed. That's something I'll never forget, and that experience changed my life.
So where do you see technology going in the next 10 years?
I think that we're going to continue to evolve where there's going to be more machine-to-machine connectivity, because we will have networked the individual, and now all of these machines are going to be speaking to each other. And so you're going to be living in a hyper-networked society. So not only, so you move from having, network computers to personal computers to cell phones then communicating with your computer, now to having all of these items communicating with your refrigerator, with your washer and dryer. And so it's the smart space, the smart home with the smart individual, hyper-networked society. And I think that's where we're moving. And it creates opportunities for entrepreneurs, but it will also create challenges for people who, like us, care about making sure people have meaningful access to these tools, which we look at as exotic and luxury items right now that will one day be turned into luxury items. Will one day be turned into necessities.
So I wanted to switch, and I'm always interested in finding out what is on people's bucket list. So what is on your personal bucket list?
Well, that's a really good question. I try to live to that. If this is my last day, I wouldn't look back with regrets. So the things that I want to continue to do is to continue to learn, right? So I want to read more. I want to read more books. I've traveled most of the world, so I guess there are a few more countries that I'd like to spend time in. I've never been to Japan.
How many countries have you been to so far?
I don't know the number.
Oh, you've lost count.
I've been in a lot of countries. I haven't gone to Japan. I haven't been to Russia. But I've been to, all over Africa and Australia and all through Europe. And, so I'd like to go to Antarctica. So there are some, I've never been to Alaska. So, going to the polar, places I think would be good. So there are a few travel things. But I just view everything that I'm doing as part of my bucket list. I want to keep tasting. I tell people I want to taste life. And so I just want to continue to taste it and launch new ventures and try different things.
Yeah, I've been to South Africa. And one thing that I came back with was the notion that Black people around the world have very parallel struggles. So that for me was a powerful takeaway because, I saw boards and protest signs from 1973 in South Africa that said, "Don't shoot." And we had just gone through the same thing in the U.S. So, in this Black History Month, one thing that I think is more important than ever is to learn about the global struggles and how they're very similar across the world.
They're extremely similar, but it's also comforting to see that. And we're not here as a stranded people. We're connected.
Right.
And that's one of the great potentials that we're just scratching the surface of this large Black diaspora all over the world, and how we can connect ourselves to each other with technology and invention. And there's so much more that's going to happen in that space. It's going to be exciting to watch. And so those are great places to visit, but there are a lot of places to taste and experience. But I really encourage, and I said Africa for a reason, because a lot of times, we get to a certain point and we think of other, cities like, oh, I got to go to Paris and I recommend all those places. But Africa has so much to offer, and its future is bright when you look at the demographics there and the market. And so it's an exciting new emerging market that people ought not forget.
Yeah, I was born in Nigeria, so I definitely feel the affinity towards the motherland.
Yes.
So, well, thank you so much, Ray. This has been an incredible conversation.
I've enjoyed it immensely, and you're a terrific interviewer. I really appreciate it. And it's not easy to talk about self, but I hope I was able to share a little bit. It's not easy, and when I opened up that window from sixth grade, it's not easy to do. It brings back some difficult memories.
And I appreciate your openness and your vulnerability in just giving that story. I think it really shows that, honestly, one person can change our lives in a fantastic way.
Well, I'll leave it. One thing that Mrs. Pfeiffer said to me is, my sixth grade teacher, she said, one thing I want you to remember, she said, never crush a human spirit. And then I told her, I said back to her, I said, well, I will take a flip on what you just said. And I said, I'll dedicate myself to lifting the human spirit. That's how I left it. And that's how I left it with her. So that's what I've never forgotten.
Thanks to Rey Ramsey for being on this show. And thank you for listening to AT&T 28 Days. We hope you continue the conversation throughout Black History Month and beyond. Visit att.com/28days for more information. Also join the conversation on social media using the hashtag ATT28Days. It has been a pleasure being your host. I'm Luvvie of AwesomelyLuvvie.com. Peace.